All right, let's dive into a word that's been everywhere lately, in the news, on your mind, and definitely in your wallet: inflation. We're going to break it down.
You've felt it, right? Whether you're filling up your car or just grabbing groceries, you've probably asked yourself this exact question. Why does it feel like your money just doesn't stretch as far as it used to? Well, to get to the bottom of it, let's start with a really simple story.
To really get what's happening in our huge, complicated global economy, we're going to shrink it way down, to the size of a tiny village. Trust me, this is the best way to see what's actually going on.
So, picture this, a small village, and it's got just one market. It's where everybody gets everything they need. Food, tools, you name it. The economy here is super simple, it's stable, life is pretty predictable.
But then, something totally new happens. The government shows up and just drops off a huge pile of cash for every single person. The idea is to get people spending money to keep the village economy humming along.
And what happens? Well, with all this extra cash in their pockets, everyone suddenly feels rich. They start buying way more than usual, splurging on things they'd only dreamed about before, like that awesome, top-of-the-line electric bike sitting in the market.
Now, at first, the store owner is ecstatic, right? Business is absolutely booming. But pretty soon he's got a problem. The bikes are just flying off the shelf. He literally can't keep them in stock. Demand is just overwhelming his supply.
So what's he going to do? He's got a line of people snaking out the door, all waving cash, all wanting a bike that he doesn't even have anymore. What's the only logical move here?
Yep, he raises the price. It's just basic supply and demand. And when this starts happening not just with the bikes, but with bread, with tools, with everything across the whole village, well, that, in a nutshell, is inflation. It's just too much money chasing too few goods.
Now, does this little story sound familiar at all? It should. That pile of cash is a pretty good stand-in for the trillions of dollars in stimulus and aid that governments pumped into the economy. And that bike shortage? Well, that was our massive global supply chain mess, which made it way harder and more expensive to get all kinds of goods.
Okay, so our village story gives us the core idea. But in the real world, economists have names for these forces. Let's look at the three main engines that push prices up across the whole economy.
First up is demand-pull inflation, and this is our village story to a T. You get a huge surge in demand, usually fueled by extra cash, and it literally pulls prices up because sellers can't keep up. The second engine is cost-push inflation. This one's a little different. It happens when it just gets more expensive for businesses to make stuff. Think about a sudden jump in the price of oil or a shortage of those computer chips that go into absolutely everything. Companies have to pay more, so they push those costs onto us, the consumers, by raising their prices.
And then there's the third one, built-in inflation. This one is all about what we expect to happen. It's like a feedback loop. You expect prices to go up, so you go to your boss and ask for a raise. Your boss agrees, but then to pay for your higher salary, they have to raise the price of what they're selling. See how that creates a cycle?
This whole cycle has a name, the wage price spiral. And this is where things get really interesting, because there's a big debate among economists. Is this spiral a cause of inflation itself, or is it just a symptom, a side effect of those first two engines we just talked about? The jury is still out on that one.
So, if the economy is like a car that's overheating with inflation, who's the driver with their foot on the brake? Who's the puppet master, trying to pull the strings and keep everything in balance?
Well, that job belongs to a country's central bank. Here in the US, you've probably heard of them. It's the Federal Reserve, or what everyone just calls the Fed. Their main job isn't to make money, it's to keep the whole economy stable and on track.
So how do they actually fight inflation? Well, their biggest weapon is the interest rate. So here's the playbook. First, the Fed raises interest rates. That makes it more expensive for everyone to borrow money, whether you're trying to get a mortgage for a house or you're a big company trying to build a new factory. Because it's more expensive, people and businesses naturally start to borrow and spend less. This cools down the overall demand in the economy, which finally takes the pressure off prices and inflation starts to slow down.
Okay, we've talked about villages, economists, and central banks. That's all great, but let's bring this right back home. How does this whole thing actually hit you and your bank account? Well, let's put it this way. In a year where there's 8% inflation, that $100 bill in your wallet is now worth 8% less. It can't buy what it could a year ago. The bill looks the same, but its purchasing power, what you can actually get for it, has shrunk. That's the real cost of inflation. It just quietly eats away at your savings and your income. So it seems obvious, right? Rising prices are bad, so falling prices must be good. But hold on, it's not that simple. The opposite of inflation is called deflation, and believe it or not, it can be even more dangerous for an economy.
It really is like walking an economic tightrope. On one side, you have high inflation, which is just destroying the value of your savings. But on the other side, with deflation, people stop spending altogether. I mean, why would you buy a new TV today if you know it's going to be cheaper next month? That spending freeze can grind the entire economy to a halt, which often leads to a recession and people losing their jobs.
And this is exactly why the goal isn't zero inflation. It's actually a little bit of inflation. Most central banks, including the Fed, are always aiming for this Goldilocks number of about 2% a year. It's just enough to encourage us to spend and invest our money, which keeps the economy moving, but it's not so high that it causes chaos.
And that is exactly where we are today. All around the world, central banks are pulling on those levers, raising interest rates to fight off this recent bout of high inflation. They're trying to pull off what's called a soft landing, basically cooling the economy down just enough to get prices under control without crashing the whole thing into a recession. And the question on everyone's mind is, can they do it? Can they stick the landing? That is the multi-trillion-dollar question of our time.